She was a nurse, a mother, a savior to 3 little girls, but one of them ended up dead. The others chained, starved, silenced. What really happened inside Gina Emmanuel's home will make your blood run cold. Subscribe now to uncover the twisted truth, because this is the story they didn't want you to hear. Gina Emmanuel. At first glance, she was the kind of woman people trusted instinctively. A licensed nurse, 56 years old, living in Miami, Florida, someone whose entire profession revolved around care and compassion. To the outside world, she wore the uniform of a healer, a woman who had dedicated her life to helping others. And when she adopted 3 young girls, people saw her as a hero. A single woman stepping up to give abandoned children a second chance. To many, Gina seemed like a quiet savior, one of those rare, selfless individuals willing to open her heart and her home to kids in need. But what no one knew was that behind the scrubs and smiles lived a very different person. Someone with a chilling obsession with control and a twisted idea of what discipline really meant. Her house didn't become a safe haven. It became a prison, one where punishment wasn't about correction. It was about power. And for 3 little girls, that house would soon become a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. Gina Emmanuel didn't just wear the mask of a caregiver, she weaponized it. She adopted not one, not two, but 3 little girls, vulnerable, voiceless, desperate for love. Only one of their names is publicly known, Samaya. She was just 7 years old, a child who had already seen too much and who finally believed she was being chosen, not forgotten. This was supposed to be her fresh start, her second chance, a forever home with a mother who wore scrubs and spoke softly. But inside those walls, behind that front door, Samia didn't find comfort. She found chains. She found hunger. She found a silence so thick, even her tears didn't echo. And what's even more disturbing, no one on the outside saw it coming. Because Gina didn't just adopt those girls. She adopted full control over their lives, and no one stopped her. It took years, but in 2025, one of the surviving girls, Samaya's older sister, stood tall in a courtroom. She was just 12 years old when the abuse happened. But now, in front of judges, lawyers, and a silent room full of strangers, she spoke the unspeakable. She would chain us, she said, voice trembling but unbreakable. She made us lie down, then she'd lock the door and leave. Not one dry eye, not one excuse left, because this child didn't just survive a nightmare. She found the courage to drag it into the light. Imagine being 12 and having to relive every locked door, every empty plate, every moment you were made to feel less than human. And yet, she did it. She told the truth for Samia and for herself. No child should ever know the language of chains. But she did, and still she spoke. November 2018, a date now etched in heartbreak. That's when Samia's small body gave out. The official cause on paper, untreated pneumonia. But prosecutors didn't mince words. Her illness didn't come out of nowhere. It was the final symptom of something far more sinister. Years of abuse, years of starvation, years of silence. She didn't die suddenly. She faded painfully, slowly, while the one person who was supposed to save her did nothing. No emergency call, no rush to the hospital. No final comfort in her last moments. And that's what cuts the deepest. She was 7, too young to fight back, too weak to cry out. And by the time the world noticed, it was already too late. When the call finally came in, it was already too late for Samaya. But for investigators, something didn't add up from the very start. The medical examiner took one look at her frail body, and alarms started blaring. Bruises, old and new, healing fractures, and a level of malnourishment that screamed long-term suffering. This wasn't the face of a child who died from a sudden illness. This was the face of a child who had been fading for months, maybe years. And then there were the sisters, quiet, withdrawn, eyes fixed to the floor. They flinched at questions. They refused to make eye contact with anyone in uniform, not police, not medics, not even the social worker. That silence, it spoke louder than words. Something dark had happened in that house. And now, finally, the truth was starting to claw its way to the surface. It didn't happen overnight. Justice in cases like this moves slowly. But in 2019, the mask finally cracked. Gina Emmanuel was officially charged, not just for neglect, not just for bad parenting or disciplinary mistakes. She was charged with murder, first degree, and the system didn't stop there. She faced 2 additional counts of aggravated child abuse because the horror wasn't limited to Samaya. Her surviving sisters had lived through the same nightmare. Same chains, same starvation, same fear. 3 little girls, one woman behind it all. And finally, the law was catching up. But the question still haunted investigators. How did it take this long to see what was happening behind the neatly trimmed lawn, behind the front door that always stayed shut? Gina Emmanuel had built something far from a home. According to court records, her house operated like a prison. No warmth, no freedom. Just rules, fear, and punishment. She allegedly used chains to restrain the girls, locked them in rooms, withheld food, called it discipline, said it was for their own good. But the bodies of those children, the bruises, the scars, the vacant stares, they told a story that no excuse could erase. It wasn't discipline. It was domination. A system designed to break spirits, not raise children. And inside that silence, one little girl didn't make it out alive. April 2025, nearly 7 years after Samaya's death, the moment had come. A jury filed into their seats. Reporters gathered. And Gina Emmanuel, the woman who once called herself mother, now sat in the defendant's chair, facing charges of first-degree murder and aggravated abuse. But this wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. And at the center of it all, a child's, now a teenager, the surviving sister stepped into the courtroom. The same girl who had been chained, silenced, starved. She took the stand and spoke to the judge, to the jury, to the world. She was the star witness, but she wasn't there to shine. She was there to tell the truth no matter how much it hurt, no matter who was listening. And every word she said brought Gina's carefully constructed world crashing down. The air inside that courtroom felt heavy, the kind of silence that presses on your chest. The prosecutor didn't hold back. She called Gina's home what it truly was, a chamber of suffering. Not a house, not a shelter, but a place where pain lived on schedule. The survivor's voice cracked as she relived the unimaginable. How they were locked away. How hunger became normal. How fear became routine. And the jury. They watched, wide-eyed, stunned, some visibly shaken. But Gina, she just sat there. No tears, no remorse. Cold, silent, unmoved. It was like she wasn't hearing the horror, because in her mind, she still controlled the room. April 14th, 2025. After days of testimony, evidence, and emotion, the jury returned. No one breathed as the foreperson stood. Not the public, not the press, not the surviving girls in the back row. We, The jury fined the defendant guilty of first-degree murder, of child abuse. The word echoed in the room like thunder. Some cried. Others closed their eyes in relief. And for the first time in years, there was justice for Samia. It didn't bring her back, but it made sure Gina would never hurt another child again. After the verdict, the public wanted answers. But what they got was a hard dose of truth. Miami-Dade State Attorney Catherine Fernandez Rundle released a statement that shook everyone reading it. No one could ever imagine that a trained nurse would beat, torture, and starve Samia and her sisters. And she was right. It's the kind of sentence that stops you mid-breath, because we're taught to trust nurses, to admire adoptive parents, to believe that some people are just born to care. But Gina Emmanuel shattered that belief. Her license didn't make her a healer. It gave her a cover, and she used it to do the unthinkable. One question still haunts this case. How? How did no one see what was happening? Gina Emmanuel was a nurse. She worked in healthcare. She had direct access to systems, support, resources, and yet no one questioned her. No teachers flagged anything. No neighbors made calls. No check-ins from child services raised red flags. Samia starved in plain sight. Her sisters were chained, emotionally shattered, and still nothing. Was it fear? Was it trust? Was it a system too overworked, too broken, too blind? Whatever the reason, it's a failure we can't afford to repeat. Because if a child can suffer this much under a licensed caregiver's roof, then the system isn't just flawed, it's dangerously silent. This wasn't just a case of one woman's cruelty. This was a collective breakdown. A nurse, a mother, a licensed caregiver trusted with society's most fragile lives. And no one stepped in. Where were the school counselors who saw the quiet stares, the sudden weight loss, the bruises? Where were the neighbors who maybe heard cries in the night but said nothing? Where were the check-ins, the red flags, the follow-ups? They weren't there. And because of that silence, Samaya's life ended far too soon. But this story isn't rare. It's not a one-off. It's a mirror reflecting a system that only reacts when it's already too late. And the most chilling question of all: how many more Samayas are out there suffering in silence right now? As of now, Gina Emmanuel has yet to be sentenced, but the verdict is in, and prison is inevitable. She will face time. She will lose her freedom. But here's the truth no sentence can erase. It won't bring Samia back. It won't undo years of trauma etched into the minds of her sisters. At best, it's a sliver of justice, a flicker of closure in a storm of pain. For those two surviving girls, healing will take a lifetime. But now, at least, they can begin. And they'll never have to face her again. In the middle of all the courtroom noise, the headlines, the horror, let's remember who this story truly belongs to. Samia. She was just 7. A little girl with bright eyes, quiet hope, and a heart that still believed in second chances. She wanted what every child wants: a hug before bed, a safe place to sleep, someone to say, "I love you." But instead, she left this world with no teddy bear in her arms, no warm words whispered into her ear, no goodbye. For too long, she was just another forgotten name. But now, through truth, through courage, through justice, we remember her. Not as a victim, but as a voice, a name we won't let disappear. To the 2 girls who made it out, we see you. We know that your survival came at a cost no child should ever have to pay. But you stood tall when it would have been easier to stay silent. Your testimony cracked the walls of fear. Your voice brought down the woman who silenced you for years. You didn't just survive. You fought back, and the world heard you. You are more than what was done to you. You are warriors in disguise, and as long as you keep speaking, we'll keep listening. Gina Emmanuel wore a nurse's badge. She called herself a caregiver. She played the part of a loving mother, but behind the scrubs, behind the smile, she was something else entirely. She turned her home into a prison. She turned discipline into cruelty. And she turned the lives of 3 innocent girls into a never-ending nightmare. This wasn't just a story about abuse. It was a story about betrayal, about how the people we trust the most can sometimes be the ones who do the most harm. But it's also a story about resilience, about a brave 12-year-old girl who stood in a courtroom and said, "No more." It's about remembering the name Samaya and making sure no other child has to suffer in silence. Because if we don't pay attention, if we keep looking away, then this won't be the last time we tell a story like this. This was the story of Samaya, of the sisters who survived, and of a justice system that finally listened. But stories like this don't end when the video does. They continue in homes, in courtrooms, and sometimes in silence. So if this case moved you, don't scroll past it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to Crime Pulse Stories for more real cases that deserve to be heard. And share this video because awareness is the first step toward change. And remember, the most powerful thing we can do for these children is never forget their names. This is Crime Pulse Stories. Stay safe, stay aware, and never stop asking. What if someone had spoken up sooner?